World is going to change. We are in a very interesting time. A madman has a lot of power now.
It's like the biggest show on earth, and I say show because it's not a very democratic process.
And what do you think about this Dodge Department of Government Efficiency?
It's so ridiculous. Musk, I find him an idiot. He's been constantly falling upwards and not delivering what he promises. It always looks like a very powerful and mighty country, right? But it's actually more like 50 separate countries. The war in Ukraine, which almost 3 years on is still ongoing. Trump will try to close off that war as soon as possible.
A lot of moving puzzles. This looks like Game of Thrones.
It is, yeah.
Hello everyone, welcome back to our podcast. So this is a third episode which we are recording together with Gwildor, and in this podcast we have basically discussed about the impact of USA election, basically Trump nomination, and how it will impact the whole globe, how it will impact the Europe and specifically Netherlands. So I hope you guys will enjoy this podcast and you will learn quite a lot, specifically from European lens, how Europe looks towards the USA. With this, I would say please enjoy the content. So Gwildor, how are you feeling today for this topic?
I'm feeling great. It's always the highlight of every 4 years, I would say, for anyone remotely interested in politics as a hobby.
Mhm.
It's like the biggest show on earth, and I say show because it's not a very democratic process. They are very good at making a show, a TV show out of it in the US. So yes, everyone, it's always a nice period.
Oh, interesting. So, tell me, what you have observed specifically this time, in US election. First, let's deep dive inside the USA election. How the dynamics has changed, or what has happened new from the European lens, I would say.
Well, it's so broad, of course, like where to start, because this election was a lot more hectic, I would say, than the previous ones. Of course, we had Biden who dropped out early because of his health. Everyone was seeing that he started to develop some dementia, and he finally had to acknowledge that as well. So he dropped out, got swapped in by Harris. Of course, there was an assassination attempt on Trump. Basically, the start of the election was a lot more hectic than the last few months. The last few months were relatively calm, but the whole setup towards the elections was very hectic. And of course, I would say from European eyes, everyone was very anxious about the elections. Of course, most Europeans were not a big fan of Trump for several reasons we will get into. But of course, everyone was very anxious looking what was going to happen across the pond, as we say.
Hmm.
And I think overall, the feeling so far now is one of very sadness for most people, anxious, wondering what's going to happen next. But of course, we've been here before in 2016, so it's not entirely new.
What this election meant for USA people. Basically, why this is so much huge mandate towards, Trump, and what they are expecting out of it. Because it seems like world is going to change. We are in a very interesting time. They want to cut the government not for the saving cost. I think as well as improving the efficiency of government. So that sounds like very exciting. I don't know how it will happen. But quite a lot of changes and de-dollarization towards de-dollarization I see. Now they are not afraid. Now they are saying like, let's do it very quickly. And it seems to
Yeah,
me, I may be wrong, that they have some kind of thought process towards this blockchain Bitcoin. I don't know. It might be a rumor or maybe perception, but their financial system is, quite a lot cracking, not cracking, but it is quite slow down, and there are a lot of problems inside USA. So they want to address it. They also have the problem of immigration. They also have the problem of this economy, and interest rates are hiking. When USA sneezes, then it impacts the whole world.
that's the thing, right? Like you say, we live in interesting times, definitely, because it's continuing things that already started before. And as you say, like when the US sneezes, like the whole world is affected because it's still the biggest economy by far. China is almost slowly catching up, but it's still not there yet. So it's still the biggest economy by far, like 10 times the size of Russia, for example,
Mhm.
or Brazil. So it has a big impact on the whole world. But what you see now, in my opinion, is the post effects of what happened like already 8 or 4 years ago, especially the COVID pandemic. The government was not able to, or the economy was not able to sufficiently recover. the Wall Street and the big companies are doing great, especially the tech companies, thanks to the artificial intelligence boom. But if you look like on the street, like the people that are doing like the lower in or middle income work, they are suffering a lot still from the COVID pandemic. There's an inflation crisis, just like what we had in Europe, still a bit ongoing in Europe. They had that there as well. So I think for a lot of people, lower and middle income people, the economy is not functioning at all as much as President Biden has promised it was. So combine that and then with other fears, like you already said, like of course, like the war in Ukraine, the war in Palestine, in Gaza with Israel. There's rising tensions with China. So I think all of that is producing a cocktail where also the far right is inventing or at least propagating an anti-immigration rhetoric. We already discussed it a little bit in the previous episode in how that was in Europe and the Netherlands. There, it's a lot worse there. All of this is just crisis on crisis. So it doesn't surprise me at all that people vote again for like a shock measure.
Have you followed, I mean, what kind of promises Trump is coming up with?
Honestly, I've not paid that much attention to Trump itself this time.
Mm-hmm.
I followed a little bit from like the blueprint for his campaign, which is Project 2025.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a 600, 700 pager that was written down by the Heritage Foundation, which is like a far right like think tank. So there are a lot of measures in there, like closing the borders, raising tariffs on the rest of the world, a lot of liberalization of the government, a lot of privatization, of course, a return as well in terms of like social care. So that means like more strict Christian evangelist way of looking at the world. So restrictions on abortion rights, restriction on gay marriage, all that kind of stuff. So all of that is not that surprising. It is a very classic conservative slash neoliberal outlook from what that we know from the Republican Party, but it is all dialed up to 11 basically.
Interesting. And what do you think about this Dodge, Department of Government Efficiency?
Yeah, it's so ridiculous, honestly. Like Musk and Ramaswamy.
Yeah, Vivek Ramaswamy.
Yeah, those are very interesting times. I don't know Ramaswamy that well, but especially Musk, I find him an idiot. I know you maybe disagree with this on this, but he's been constantly falling upwards and not delivering what he promises. So I'm very interested in what he's going to do now. I do agree with what you discussed before we start recording a little bit, is that there is a need to increase transparency for the government, especially because the US government is it's not very centralized because the way that the country works, it's 50 different states plus a few regions that don't have statehood, like Puerto Rico. And that means that all of their states have their own infrastructure in terms of the government. So they have their own government agencies. It always looks like a very powerful and mighty country, right? But it's actually very spread out. It's actually more like 50 separate countries in one. So that means there is a lot of overhead between them because, for example, if two states have to work together, then you have two agencies that have to work together instead of having one agency that does the same.
So there is a quite a lot of complexity inside this, I mean, which you are trying to say. Interesting. It looks like, I mean, it is a genuine problem for them.
It is, yeah. You see that in different countries as well, where you have like a very strong regional power. For example, Spain or Belgium, some other countries maybe as well, maybe Brazil as well, where you have very strong local powers and then a very relatively weak federal power. So if you think about it, the US, what is the biggest federal agency is the military. That's basically the own federal power that's very strong, maybe the FBI and the tax agencies. But like all, for example, the Social Security, the natural protection agencies, all the agencies that have to like do checks and balances on the economy, the private companies, that's all spread out over the individual states. So the individual states are very strong compared to, for example, in the Netherlands, where the province that we have is relatively weak compared to the national state.
That's a very unique perspective. For me, it is unique because I haven't gone through with this, but that's a good learning for me. Interesting.
I also wanted to talk a little bit about the Democrats
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
I think honestly, of course, we have to acknowledge that the Republicans won really big. But I think this was not necessarily an election that the Republicans really won because their campaign was pretty mediocre. They made some big mistakes. They did gain a little bit of votes compared to the previous time. I think around 75 million, which is like 3 million more, I think, than the previous time in 2020. But I think this election was more the Democrats losing and losing very big. So what at the start when Harris was swapped in for Biden, there was a huge momentum for Harris. There was a lot of positive energy. She raised 1 billion US dollars for her campaign, and they actually end up now in debt, like 20 and 30 million. So they wasted all of this money. They made a lot of mistakes, and they lost 8 million votes compared to 2020. So they
Hmm.
didn't gain any votes, they lost 8 million votes. And what you saw is that what they lost, of course, the presidency, but they also lost the Senate. They also lost the House of Representatives, so both chambers of parliament. And they also lost a lot of other smaller elections as well.
So basically, at this point in time, Trump is with complete power, full power.
He is, yeah,
A
for the
mad,
first time since 2004, I think,
so a
that a
madman, a
Republican has
madman have
all.
basically a madman has a lot of power now.
Exactly, yes. Yeah.
And he's yeah, I mean it's very seriously, I mean it would be very interesting to see, I mean along, I mean in coming next 4 years what will happen. Could go, I mean, in a kind of very wrong way, or maybe it could bring more prosperity or something, or it could become a model for other democracies. But we will see, I mean what will happen in the future. Future will tell us.
For me, I'm very curious to see if they can hold it together,
Mhm.
and if they will be able to enact all the plans that I disagree with, but they will try to enact. It is very curious to or interesting to see if that will work, or what I'm hoping a little bit more, but it would also be funnier, I would say, is if they would start fighting amongst each other a lot. You
I've
see that in some different countries as well, when like the far right comes into power, then they start having like their egos and they start clashing with each other,
Yeah, I can also, I mean, kind of imagine that this kind of scenario, there is a possibility. So,
especially with like egos like Musk. Can you imagine Elon Musk and Donald Trump in one room together? I would be want to be a fly on the wall of that conversation.
I was also thinking, sir, I mean, about this. I mean, how this chemistry will go. I mean, I wouldn't say, I mean, Elon Musk mad, but I mean, somehow, I'm not saying, I mean, he's good or something. It's not, I mean, it's future will tell. I don't know. But he might be a genius, I mean, in technology or in kind of concepts was, I mean, in this in innovation. I mean, I do not have any perception, neither, I mean, on the good side, neither on the bad side. It is, I mean, future will tell us basically. So I was saying, I mean, let's take a little bit turn towards the, I mean, European lens. What would be the impact of this, what is happening inside USA, and what they are kind of, I mean, what kind of policy they're gonna enact, and how it will impact our European system. And yeah, later on we will discuss about the Netherlands. What could be the impact for implication or impact for Netherlands?
Yeah, so I think for Europe, it's of course the worst possible outcome for the European Union and also the individual countries, especially in terms of the policies that were enacted the last decades. Again, like this is not the first time we had Trump in office. We already had him between 2016 and 2020. So it will not be totally new. Like we've had survived those 4 years, we will survive these four as well. But it will continue the trend that has already started in terms of the United States raising their borders, basically in terms both in physical borders with Mexico, but especially also with trade and their economy. So that means that the US will be more and more on itself, and that the European Union and Europe as a whole needs to step in a little bit and also yeah they need to figure out how to stand on their own feet a little bit more and not always be dependent on the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I think that could be a good development because you're not always blindly following what the United States is doing. There's a lot of room also there for economic development and also diplomatic to become more independent, to have like your own voice a little bit raised as well. But yeah, it will definitely be challenging because Europe is not united itself either. There's a lot of different opinions there. So I think if you look at the global stage, there are two things that come to mind. First is the war in Ukraine, which almost 3 years on is still ongoing. Russia has been making some really big gains in the last few weeks, basically the biggest gains in maybe 1 or 2 years.
Like?
Like more area of control. So they are forwarding their border a lot. They get like a few hundred meters per day with their troop movements. So I think that Trump will try to close off that war as soon as possible. With that, I mean is he will push for a peace treaty as soon as he is in office. And that peace treaty will most likely be very negative for Ukraine, meaning that Ukraine will have to give up a lot of its land that's currently under Russian occupation. It will also possibly mean that the United States will stop delivering arms to Ukraine, which could mean that Europe needs to stand up. They need to produce a lot more weapons and deliver them to Ukraine, or Europe will just accept it and then keep Ukraine, a smaller Ukraine than it was before 2022, as like a buffer state between the European Union slash NATO on one hand and Russia on the other hand. So that's one. The other one is China. Of course, there's been like an ongoing trade war with China already since the first Trump presidency in 2016. And I think this will continue a lot more. So there will be more sanctions, more tariffs on Chinese products. There is also an ongoing conflict with Taiwan, the island which is sort of independent of China, sort of not. China wants to occupy it to make it part of the mainland again. In Taiwan, of course, they don't want to do that. But there are the geographically, geopolitically very important chip making factories there. You
Mm-hmm.
already see China developing their own chip making factory. We have within the Netherlands at ASML the chip making factory as well. And you also see the US under Biden actually starting chip making factories as well. So this is all with the aim to reduce the importance of Taiwan. But
Mm-hmm.
once that importance is gone, then maybe yeah, it could be become a single point of conflict between China and US, which might also become a military conflict. And all of this is then leading to Europe, which again has to figure out what it wants to do. Does it want to continue following the US, even while the US is becoming more and more independent? Or does it want to soften up the relationships with China, maybe also the other countries which are in the BRICS construction, so Brazil, maybe even Russia? Especially I would say India and South Africa, they're also very interesting. Mexico is also maybe becoming a part of this. So it has to figure out, do we want to follow the US or do we want to soften up relations with these countries as well?
Interesting, interesting. I think, I mean, for Taiwan, my perception doesn't see like that US is going to involve with Taiwan. China does something to Taiwan because they have their own issues, and I don't think they're gonna to be. I mean, it's just, I mean, they will try to prolong this process as soon as, I mean, their dependency is going to be less and less. So
Who is they? China or the US?
I'm saying, I mean, China will attack Taiwan. It will eventually happen within these four
Mm-hmm.
4 years. It looks like, and USA will not do too much. They will just try to prolong this. Basically, not right now, not 1 year, maybe 2 year after 2 years. Till then, basically try to set up your own factories or something. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, exactly the details, how much time it takes. Maybe a year or 2 year. But if somebody is behind this, I mean, like 100% focus, then it can be achieved. Lot of moving puzzles. It looks like Game of Thrones.
It
No?
is, yeah. Like it's very weird because after decades and decades of US hegemony, basically we had a period post-war, post-Second World War, where the United States was the major power in the world.
Yeah.
But the last 20 years has been going downhill in decline thanks to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I think the election from Trump has only accelerated this both in 2016 and now it will accelerate more in 2024. So yeah, it is very interesting. We're going towards what we call a multipolar world, where instead of one major power, we have several major powers. So
Yeah.
the question is, can Europe be a major power in that play, or will it be just United States, which will be further and further in decline, and China, and maybe Brazil or India as well?
I think, especially for European point of view, I think, there would be a big contribution of Germany in this play. And Germany also has their own bureaucracy problems, I see, which I heard. They are also quite bureaucratic. So innovation is not at that pace
Yeah.
as, if you compare to USA
Well,
ecosystem.
but that's the thing, right? Because that's a very interesting difference between Europe and the United States is that the United States has always been a little bit protectionist, which means that they kept some of the industry, the lower level, lower educated industry, so like factories, all that kind of stuff, a lot of farmland still, of course, as well. Whereas Europe has very much outsourced this to different regions. If you look at China and now also other regions like India or Bangladesh, there is a lot of production that's happening for the Western market. So a lot of products, clothes, electronics, etc., are imported towards US, but especially Europe. And if you compare, if you see like how much industry the Europe still has, it's not a lot. So that will be a problem. So basically what some people say needs to happen now is that Europe needs to re-industrialize to build their own factories again, so it's able again to build those computers, clothes, all of that stuff. Because otherwise, if it will raise the tariffs on China, just like the US will do, then it will cut its own feet off because it will not be able to sustain its own economy.
Interesting. This could be my perception only. I was listening some other debates or podcasts. One guy, he was saying that Europe does not have that kind of entrepreneurial mindset or skill because too much work life balance. People want to enjoy their life more. There is a little bit of pivot needed, maybe. I don't know, whether it is possible, not possible, or whether it is right or wrong. But in order to sustain in this race, it's also a bit of race as well, like competition. In order to sustain in this, something needs to change little bit in that sense. I don't know. It's just a understanding which I have developed from there.
I don't really have a strong opinion on that, honestly. It's you can go either way with that argument, I think. But I don't think we work that much less in Europe. I think the work that is being done in Europe is mostly in service industry. So that means like a lot of like bars, restaurants. So a lot of leisure, indeed, a lot of leisure economy, and
Mm.
also financial, especially in London, and also a bit of IT, not as much as, for example, US. It is a bit of a problem in that sense that we have like either we do have still a lot of farmland, especially in France,
Hmm.
and also Spain and Italy, I think. Ukraine, of course, as well. A lot of wheat farms there or grain. We don't really have that much like the middle anymore. So we have like a lot of like lower industry like farmlands, and a lot of like high developed industry like financial and service industry. But we don't really have like those factories anymore. For example, we do have them a little bit in Germany. That's maybe one of the last places that still has them. A lot of car manufacturing, for example, train manufacturing. So I think it is possible to regain that. I don't really think it's an attitude problem, but of course, the attitude is the product of your economy. So I do think indeed we should go towards a little bit of an economy where we have maybe a little bit less people behind the desk and a little bit more people on the factory floor again. Maybe that balance needs to become a little bit healthier again, and that in turn will maybe spearhead the innovations that we need. For example, that we discussed last episode, innovations on climate change, in transport, all that kind of things.
Yeah, a good point. Which you said. I'm also agree with this thought process. One thing, you didn't mention, but I think, that should also be a bit of a strong focus. Basically, building digital products more. Like Germany builds this SAP, so that is one digital product. SAP.
The SAP, sorry.
S&P, maybe SAP. If you search it, later on. So most of the big organization have this ERP system, SAP, and for a very long period of time, especially big organizations. So that is one digital product I would say. But I don't see. I mean, like Google is from there, Facebook is from USA. Again, I mean, all big digital platforms. They are not coming from Europe. I mean, I think there is this. I mean, there is quite a lot can be done. You have like Germany, Netherlands, Sweden. Well, I mean, these are very prosperous countries, and there is a possibility. I mean, this kind of innovation can happen.
I agree with you, but there is one area where Europe is doing okay, and that is actually again finance.
Hmm.
So finance technology is a pretty decently sized industry within Europe. For example, companies like Adyen,
Yeah.
we're getting a European single payment system now as well, which is based on the Dutch ideal system.
Mhm.
So I think in the terms of like the financial market, there is between like Frankfurt and London, those are very big financial hubs in Europe. There is a big industry there on the digital plane.
Okay, okay. Interesting. You told me something which I wasn't aware. And also this Ardian, I mean, since I personally interviewed with them, so I know this company because I have read about something. And it's an interesting company, and company is quite decent, I would say. And similar
Yeah, it's pretty
companies like,
big. Yeah.
yeah, and similar companies like Bunk is also booming. It's quite a lot of people I see. I mean, especially freelancers. They use, I mean, for invoicing sometimes. Interesting. Let's take the turn now specifically on Netherlands. I mean, a lot of people in when I talk to Dutch people outside, I think I mean maybe they were saying in comic way or maybe they are joking. But I think there is some kind of news is running in Netherlands that impact would be like 500 euros more on everybody, something like that. In some news outlets or somewhere. I mean, it is being said. I mean, for everyone, it's like 500 euros more spending
Hmm.
and you are not earning more.
Hmm.
So don't take it like a digital word. What are the impacts are being discussed within Netherlands specifically?
So I think the impact for the Netherlands will actually be minor
Hmm.
materially. The immediate impact from the Trump election. I think the impact from the other things that we discussed so far will be a lot bigger. So how Europe will reposition itself and how it will position itself against China and maybe the other countries, that will determine also the impact for the Netherlands. So the Netherlands is, of course, a very big trade country, a very big import and export country, very strong ties with the German economy, for example. So basically, whenever trade will be impacted and imports from, for example, China or even the US will be constricted, that will impact the Netherlands as well. And that is a problem because the Netherlands is a very big food producer, but other than that, it doesn't produce that much anymore. So it's historically been a trade country and it still is. So
Hmm.
whenever trade will become smaller in the world stage, that will also impact the Dutch economy, I think.
Okay, so this is what we are talking about towards the trade, and I think I mean you will also have this kind of more and more expenditure as we have also discussed in the last episode towards the defense side because you have to be now stand on your own foot.
Hmm.
So quite a lot of, I mean, defense spending and maybe the market of, I mean, defense innovation. I expect it will grow. Some
Yes,
lot of
definitely.
innovations. Basically, once you have pressure or once you are in a difficult conditions, then innovations also happens quite fast. I think it in this way.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So what we discussed last episodes that the new Dutch government is already investing like 37 billion
Yeah, something
euros
like that. Yeah.
more on top of the existing expenditure for the Dutch military. And you see this trend in the whole of Europe where all the expenditures are going up. I think Germany is spending 100 billion euros more on its army. So coupled with like the reindustrialization, which I said before, there's also a re-militarization of Europe happening. There are ongoing plans about a European army. Most countries still don't really want that, regardless of what you think of the idea. A lot of countries are still don't want to give up that sovereignty. So it's not really going through, but they are now. I think this was a plan that was announced in last winter somewhere by the European Commission. They have like a new pool for innovation in army expenditure. So that means that like innovations within the European states will be shared more easily. So it's basically like a slush fund, right, to produce more research and development in the military throughout all of Europe. And that's like a first step towards a European army, even though like all the branches and all the battalions, etc., they are not yet cooperating as one. They are still separate, and they all still fall under their own states, governments. But yeah, I definitely foresee a future where maybe in 5 years, maybe in 10 years, where the developments on the world stage continue like they do what we discussed just now, that we will have a European army. Maybe as part of NATO, or maybe NATO will collapse because of a bigger tear between the US and Europe.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the European armies will integrate more. And that will, of course, like I said, like will also push the reindustrializations. And like you said, it will push innovation as well. So it will become an economy where the army and military innovation is a bigger part of the economy again, just like we already have seen for decades in the US.
Interesting times.
Very
What
interesting
will
times, yes.
and we are at the, I think, at right age, I think. If might be, if I might be like 15, I could not even grasp, what is really happening.
Well, you could all call it interesting, but I don't know. Maybe if World War III starts and happens on European soil, then maybe then it will not be as fun.
Interesting.
Definitely interesting, yes.
Yeah, at least, it's not stagnant and it will run like smoothly. Maybe a lot of changes, hiccups. And I'm a personally believer, when there is a lot of change or difficult times comes, then basically it's, after some time, you re-innovate yourself and you come up with larger strength,
Hmm.
better strength.
Yeah, sure.
So
That's true.
yeah, except this part, that World War Three, I do, God help us. It should not happen. We are in a prosperous and quite good world. Which was like, if you compare to 1945 or these kind of
Hmm.
timelines, that was a difficult period. Nowadays, life is quite easier, and we can. People are, living quite better life, ability to improve, and people have their own journey nowadays. I would say,
Yeah, there's a lot
if you
more
compare
freedom.
to like, yeah, a lot of more freedom,
The
expressiveness.
social mobility as well.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's
Okay.
still it's still a little bit sad, right? Because there's like in the US already, I don't have the figures on the top of my head, but there's like hundreds of billions going to the military there every year.
Almost like 800 billion.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, insane. If you compare that to like the second and third largest armies in the world, so the ones that come after the United States, it's a lot less. So you think about it, what is all that money for? And that money could have gone to Social Security, it could have gone to healthcare and jobs, could gone to public transport. And the
Mm-hmm.
same now goes in the European Union. Like the 100 billion from Germany, it could have gone to healthcare, it could have gone to public transport. So why is it going to? I agree, there is some sort of innovation happening,
But there is
research
also
and
a struggle.
development, but
There
there's
is
also a
all
struggle, yeah.
economically. People have to struggle for some time at least.
And
Hmm.
personally, I would rather have like a new tram than a new tank.
I like your, your local point of view. It's all. And some interesting questions are coming up. Our viewers would be expats and a lot of people watching from Asia or something. So they will also have some better understanding. Otherwise, mostly in Asian news channels, the news are based on geopolitical foundation government policies. So people don't know this perspective. I would like to understand specifically about Ukraine, how Europe and then Netherlands specifically take this Ukraine and this war, reasoning behind it. How do you reason? Who is wrong, who is right? The news which we consume as well. So it's like a provocation from USA to expand the NATO, and then it's basically insecurity from Russia, and then they basically claim that okay, we are feeling insecurity, we're gonna to take some actions on Ukraine, and then conflict started, and then this is what I'm saying from Asian point of view. I would like to understand your point of view, means
Hmm.
European point of view, so that other people will also can understand, digest it. Then Europe is also spending a lot of money giving to Ukraine. USA is also involved. What actually, everybody wants, specifically Netherlands, what Netherlands wants, and how it looks, this situation, apart from, don't consider, like Russia is just a hateful thing or Putin is something bad. That's okay. He's doing his job. I would say, I don't know. Whether you, how you will take it. Explore this word for us.
Like personally, I am a bit more nuanced, just like you actually. I think we agree pretty much on this actually. But if you look in the European news and the Dutch news, it's a lot more black and white. So how it is framed here is that Putin is the big bad dictator, and Ukraine and the West is like the good guys who are like attacked without reason, all that kinds of stuff. So basically, what we have is we have a country that's been in civil war since 2014. Basically, the government at the time wanted to stop the European integration that was happening and wanted to pivot a bit more to Russia, but the population was a bit more in favor of further European integration. It was very close. I think it was like 55, 45%, something like that. And it was also on geographical divides. So the western part of Ukraine was a lot more pro-Europe. The eastern part of Ukraine was a lot more pro-Russia. And you also saw this on different lines. It all has also historical reasons. It goes back as far as the Russian Revolution more than 100 years ago. But that's all a lot of things to go into now. You had a country that was internally divided. They were even speaking two languages. They are similar, but there are notably different. Is that the West was speaking Ukrainian and the East was speaking Russian, and that was allowed. Russian was allowed as a language within the country. But in the decades leading up to 2014, you always saw like elections happening along this geographical divide of West and East. When the government in 2014, which was a pro-Russian government, wanted to pivot back to Russia, and especially the western part of the population didn't want to do this. They started a big protest, which happened. Some people call it a coup, some people call it just the fall of the government. But a pro-European government was installed after the pro-Russian government was ousted and had to flee. But basically, what happened then is that in eastern Ukraine, a civil war started, and that's been going on for 8 years, up to
Which war you are talking about? Sorry.
so it's a civil war in the Donbas region. So that's the
But
furthest east of Ukraine. Between 2014 and 2022, there was a civil war there. It was not that big. I think like 10,000 people were killed in that civil war. But it was an ongoing conflict for the full 8 years, which European leaders such as Macron and Merkel tried to solve together with Putin. So there were two sets of negotiations and accords agreed to, the Minsk Accords. But unfortunately, they, for a variety of reasons, they didn't stop the civil war. And then you also, on top of that, you indeed have what you said is like the expansion of NATO towards the east, toward Russia, the expansion of the European Union. There were talks of Ukraine joining NATO and maybe joining the European Union as well. Indeed, in beginning of 2022, Russia decided, okay, this civil war is not going anywhere. It's still not resolved after 8 years. We see an expanding NATO, we see an expanding European Union. We need to step in now before they are fully in the grasp of the West. And they invaded and occupied eastern Ukraine till this day. And
hmm,
it's a horrible, horrible war because already I think 500,000 people have been killed on the battlefield.
500,000 people in this
And it's,
age,
yeah,
and I
mostly
mean,
mostly Russian soldiers, also a lot of Ukrainian soldiers, but also a lot of civilians, tens of thousands of civilians as well, or maybe a little
one
bit less, but a lot, mostly soldiers at least. But yeah.
one strong thought is coming into my mind. It looks like stupidness of country leaders. It's a result of this, nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
They won't
Yeah.
be able to communicate correctly
Yeah.
or efficiently. Communication was not good enough.
It
Too
is
many.
like indeed you can say different things depending on what your view on this is, right? Because you can see Putin as like or the Russian state as like the evil invaders, but you need to keep in mind what is the reason why they would do this as well. If you want to solve a conflict, you also need to understand your opponent and what were their motivations to do this. And for me, indeed, like the basis is okay, 500,000 people have already been killed. A lot more people are being killed every day, between a few hundred and 1,000 people or something like that every day. If you want to stop that conflict, then you need to start talking again and you need to start negotiating. It's a way of like realpolitik, as we sometimes say in the West, where
Hmm.
you set aside your ideological reasons and you see like, okay, what's the current situation and what how can we try to solve this? And the current situation is that Russia is occupying a big part of Ukraine, whether you like it or not. So that means if you want to get into peace talks, you will need to give up at least a part of Ukraine and let Russia continue to have that. Because the other side is you can try to force them out, but the West has been trying to do that already for a few years. European countries have been, and the US as well, have been giving a lot of money and a lot of arms, weapons, bullets, armaments to the Ukrainian army, and
Hmm.
it's not worked. So after a few years and not working, you can either escalate further, which would mean full NATO involvement. So that means to not just have the Ukrainian army fighting, but also the NATO armies. But then you are just looking at an all-out war with Russia, between the West and Russia. So then you're very close already to that Third World War. So
Hmm.
if you don't want that, and I don't want that, then you need to start negotiations. And negotiations always happen at the table and not on the battlefield. So that means you actually need to start talking with Putin again. Sure, you will not like it, but you will need to give up a little bit of your own ideals as well to meet him in the middle. Now the real question is, and that is a little bit of an uncountered argument, is like some people say like, yeah, if we have like an argument now with Putin and we get to an compromise, then what's to say that he will not do it again in 5 or 10 years? He's already been doing it with areas before Ukraine. He did it with like Georgia, I think, and
Yeah.
Czechia.
Crimea, I think.
Crimea, of course, indeed, in 2014 already. That is a problem also. In my opinion, in my point of view, that is also a problem with, for example, the United States, where they have invaded Iraq a few times and also Afghanistan and then also Libya and also a lot of other countries. I think it's a bit hypocritical to just have this criticism of Russia, but it is a genuine problem because indeed you can get a temporary ceasefire for maybe 5 or 10 years where you agree like okay maybe Eastern Ukraine will be its own independent country and it will be a de facto buffer state under control of Russia, and then the West Ukraine will be its own independent country and it will be a de facto buffer state under control of the European Union and NATO. But of course, the contradictions there, the tensions will not go away. So a military conflict will probably flare up again, maybe 5 or 10 years down the line.
Still, if we can achieve this 5 to 10 years peace, because
It's
that will
better
give
than
us,
all that war.
yeah, because I mean that will give us, I mean, as a word, chance to make it a little bit better. Even, I mean, what is going to happen after 10 years? If you can, first of all, get to that situation, then it is so easy. Then maybe there is a possibility that, I mean, after 10 years, it will not happen. I mean, you
Hmm.
can also see that because there is a possibility still left. You can control it.
Yes, true. So there's two other trains of thoughts here. The other one is that I think that this war has shown that the European armies are in a very bad state. They are not able to fight a war with Russia in Ukraine. They are not able to sufficiently like arm the Ukrainian army. That ties into the discussion that we had earlier about that Europe maybe is going to re-militarize and through that can actually re-industrialize by starting up new arms factories, new ammunition factories, stuff like that. But yeah, again, that will cost a lot of money. That's not going to healthcare or fighting against climate change.
So
Um,
basically, quality of life may go on bit of decrease side for some years. Maybe later on it
exactly.
can revive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other train of thought here is, well, there's a difference between what I think will happen and what I wish would happen. So I think the first thing is what I would think will happen, but do not wish, is rather the further militarization of Europe. So what I wish would happen is that we can convince the Russian citizens to reject the current leadership in Russia, reject Putin. It's not only Putin. We always talk about Putin as if he is some evil, magical person, but of course he's just a figurehead for a very broad tendency within Russian and especially the Russian government. So there are a lot of other guys just like him that if, for example, if you would kill Putin today, if you would assassinate him, someone else would just step in and continue this current line of government.
Basically, you are trying to say, I mean, just from this socialist or what's the word, communist, socialist, whatsoever, but trying to convert on the democracy side, basically
Yes, yeah, yeah,
elections and all these things,
yeah,
many
exactly.
parties.
So like Russia is
That
like a
is
pro.
also, I mean, that would be quite good, I mean, for the prosperity of this entire world, I think. I
Yes,
mean,
definitely.
if it can be achieved.
Yeah, definitely. So Russia is currently a proto-fascist government, I would say.
Hmm.
There is no freedom of press at all. There's no freedom of people to protest. There's almost no political freedom. I know a lot of people that fled Russia in the last 10 or the last just 2 years. Of
Hmm.
course, there is the subscription, the forced subscription into the army. All men between like 18 and 30, or I don't know the specific ages, but there is now, and there will be, and that will become like a big problem as well for the society after the war. There's like a lot of young Russians dying or being killed on the battlefield. Yeah, there is a big problem in Russia, and hopefully, I hope that Russian civilians somehow will be able to turn this around and to reject this current leadership in their country. Because if you think about this, the same goes for Ukrainians in the end. The Ukrainian people and the Russian people, they are very close together, ethnically, culturally, etc. It's their leaderships that are forcing them to fight together. It's not the people. I think the people within those countries would be able to make peace with each other and ensure that no further conflict would break out. But yeah, that would mean that, especially in Russia, but also a little bit in Ukraine, the civilians of those countries need to replace their current governments. But of course, there is no freedom there now, so that is also very hard to do.
Similar cases with China as well. A lot of people and their lifestyle is also gone up, and most probably once lifestyle goes up, demand for freedom or freedom of speech and all these kind of things they pop up. People start feeling like, I mean, okay, this communist system may not work more, and maybe younger population will revolt. Not revolt, but when in this kind of regime, I mean, basically power is quite a lot of, I mean, to the leaders, they can do quite a
Mm,
lot of things. I mean, it's basically, if you are saying something against, I mean, you are gone. Nobody can see it. And then the fear factor, so it's basically like revolt kind of, when people are not caring about their life, and that kind of situation which was in the past, if you see in the Europe and in other countries.
yeah,
I'm talking,
exactly.
world is so prosperous place, and now still they are living in these problematic things.
And like even one thing that I want to mention is on this as well is that also for Russia there are historical reasons why the current government is in power and why it is like a far right government that is now becoming imperialist by invading other countries. Because it all goes back in this case with the fall of the Soviet Union, and in the 90s a lot of the industry was privatized, was sold off, and a lot of Western capital came in and bought a lot of the like the factories and the power plants and all that kind of stuff. That's where the rise of the oligarch
What
came
does it
from.
mean? Oligarch means?
So oligarch is a word which we usually only use for Russia, but in my opinion, it also applies to US. For example, Elon Musk, in my opinion, is an oligarch. So it's basically just a very rich person that has a very big influence through his wealth on the government.
Okay.
So an oligarchy is like a country that is led by wealthy people.
I think it's a case of USA at least. It's also true for many democratic countries, because businessmen's most probably they prefer, I mean, either party. I mean, whether it is a right side or left side or whatsoever, they basically follow all of them. But their influence is all over the, in most of the countries, in most of the democracies. I don't know specifically about Netherlands and how
In
much
the
impact
Netherlands
of
as
the,
well, definitely, yeah. Through lobbying, there's a lot of
yeah.
influence there, yeah. But so basically to finish that thought, like what happened in the 90s in Russia
Yeah.
is what we call the shock doctrine, is where through like shock and conflict, a big part of the economy fell and was privatized. These capitalists from the West and also from within Russia came in to buy up all these companies which used to be public, which used to be part of the Soviet Union government. And so what happened is that the living standards in Russia in the 90s fell a lot. And also the population fell. Like if you look at, for example, the population of Ukraine, but also of Russia, of Moscow, of St. Petersburg, all those areas, between 1990 and 2020, in some areas it fell with 25%. A 25% decrease in population, that's unsustainable for any society. There was a lot of poverty, lack of healthcare, a lot of hunger.
Lack of skilled worker or non-skilled, both kind of workers.
Yes, definitely.
I mean, who will run the economy? I mean, who will?
Exactly. If you look at a graph, for example, like the economic development in the 90s of those post-Soviet states, it's very
Mhm.
shocking. And it makes sense that after 10 years of that and no real way back up, that at a certain point a right-wing government that promises the world, but does that through its military interventions, it will rise up. It's very sad.
Interesting. Two things I just want to clarify whatever we have discussed here. One thing is you mentioned about 8 years of civil war within Ukraine on the west
Hmm.
side.
East
I
side, east
mean,
side. Yeah,
on the east side, eastern. Okay.
yeah.
So what was that again? I mean, for our viewers.
It's been a while as well for me as well. But basically, what Ukraine as a whole was pivoting more towards Europe, but the eastern areas of Ukraine did not agree with that. They wanted to stay closer to Russia. They initiated a civil war to become independent, which actually means to become like a state under influence of Russia. Of course, not fully independent. Like there was, of course, a big influence from Russia to push them towards declaring independency, and also they were supplied with arms, etc. So it
Mhm.
was a little bit of a proxy war already for 8 years between Russia and Ukraine before Russia just decided, okay, this isn't going nowhere. We're just going to invade and make it a real war. So yeah, it started like that by the eastern areas of Ukraine declaring independence because they disagreed with the western turn of West Ukraine.
Interesting. Do you have insights about this? I mean, how does this government works in Russia? I mean, because I haven't, I mean, I'm not 100% concrete, but I just know, I mean, they are they are not democratic. I just know this. They are not democratic, but who they are, I mean, how their election works. I mean, is there any transparency or it has like complete one man show or something like what exactly it is?
That's a tough question. I also don't really know the answer to that, honestly. But I think on paper they have the democratic systems that we know from a lot of other countries. But in practice, there's, for example, like the elections committee that determine who is allowed to become a candidate. Those are all in favor of the current government. And so actually at the elections committee will already prevent a lot of like alternative candidates from running.
Ah, okay. We started our podcast from the USA election and impact now we are too much inside.
We started from Trump and we went to Putin. Yes. Interesting times, like we said.
Yes. I think I mean from here I mean we can say I mean enough for this podcast maybe we're going to discuss some next topic and its impact as time will change and new policies will come emerge out more clarity will come out then we can have more discussion about this.
Yes.
So
It
Gilder
will take time
any
for all these things to develop.
yes any last thought Gilder before we wrap up our
Yes.
pod.
I had one last thought is to tie this all back to the election of Trump.
Hmm.
Is that I said earlier that I think the impact on the Netherlands will not be that big, but more of the impact of all of Europe. But I do think the impact culturally will have an effect. We already saw this in 2016, where a lot of far-right people felt they were heard. They felt it was okay again to raise their concerns, to give their opinions. So I do think that for the current right-wing government that we have in the Netherlands under Geert Wilders, and also for other right-wing, far right-wing governments like Meloni in Italy, Orban in Hungary, I think for them it will be a massive boost, and that will also play itself out in the next few elections in European countries. So the next 4 years, I think they will all have like a small or large boost. For example, Le Pen, maybe in France, maybe she will finally be elected to president. AfD in Germany, there will be German elections, snap elections occurring in February of 2025,
Hmm.
so a few months from now. So maybe AfD in Germany will have a boost from this. I think culturally and politically, we will also feel this election of Trump as well.
Very, very interesting. I hope, I mean, our viewers will really enjoy the insights which we tried to explore. And I would say, I mean, we haven't just, I mean, we are not like a journalist or not journalist, but I mean, like a 100% correct. I mean, there are some perceptions from our side. We may not be correct. We may not be wrong
We're
in
also
some
just
places. Yeah.
civilians that are reading the news.
Yeah, it's just a perspective from our side, and I hope viewers will really enjoy it. And thanks, Gilder, for coming to us our show.
Thank you as well.
And for our viewers, I mean, we may look forward, I mean, for having more and more episodes with Gilder. If you are watching this content till here, that means you are enjoying the content. So please do not forget to like this video and subscribe this channel. That will give us more and more confidence to build further content. There are some links available on the screen. You can watch my other episodes as well. Till then, signing off. Bye bye. Tara.